Here we are drafting the May 2013 cube on Magic Online. This is a single elimination draft which I just joined. Last time I did a Swiss draft to make sure that I got 3 rounds in. Really not sure how to go about this decision. I just jumped into the queue that was filling up right now. Just let me know in the comments if you prefer Swiss or a single elimination for cube drafts in particular. I'm always going to do 8-4s for the expert sets, but cube is somewhat different and you want to have a nice experience, do some experimenting. So I feel there's a higher chance of me losing in round 1 or in an early round. But losing is part of Magic as well. So here we have Balance and Survival, 2 cheap and very good cards. Green aggressive cards aren't what I'm looking for. Land tax is fine. I think that Survival has the highest upside of all these cards. And the cube is very creature based, which means that being able to get any creature out of your deck that's good is definitely a good way to start with. In theory, Survival puts us into the mid-range category of decks. It can be played in an aggressive deck or in control decks, but both aren't really made for Survival. And it's usually unlikely to have a combo deck, but a deck with a lot of ramp, creature-based ramp and fatties also can use Survival very well. And if we pick up Recurring Nightmare, that would also be great. Now, this pack doesn't really have much. Will is insane in a combo deck that's built to support it, but pretty bad otherwise. And I don't like most of these cards. Skinrender is okay, and Obstinate Baloth is a nice tutor target for Survival. I think I'm just going to take it because I also think it's one of the stronger cards in the pack next to Skinrender and Will, and it fits our first pick the best. So it's still not clear if we will be able to support drafting green, but we are off to a good start. Next up we have some mass removal, Wrath of God and Oblivion Stone. Oblivion Stone being pretty expensive and Wrath putting us into a white-green color combination that's somehow creature based but still wants to play Wrath of God, and that just doesn't seem like a very good idea. In green we have Flinthoof Boar that needs a mountain to be truly effective, and Rancor, which I could see being quite nice, although I don't really see it as a high pickup. Most powerful cards in the pack, probably Preordain. I think it's better than Impulse. Being able to scry and then draw a card is pretty insane. And I know that Preordain is going to be good in all decks that are going to have blue. So I kind of like it, even though blue-green is somewhat of a weird color combination. I'm just going to go with what I think is the most powerful card here. There's an Armageddon, always a card to respect, but not something I'm too keen on picking up here. We have Wall of Roots and Wall of Blossoms, 2 very powerful green 2-drops, and both work well with Survival. You can drop them on turn 2, but you can always make them into a larger creature later on. I'm not going to go with Armageddon here, I already said that. So picking up one of the green cards is the most logical choice. The question is if drawing a card is better than the mana advantage of Wall of Roots. One of the easiest way to lose games in Cube is falling behind too early, and I think that Wall of Roots is actually more important than Wall of Blossoms, given the creature-centric makeup of the cube right now. This pack has a pretty late Ulamog. I think 5th pick is quite late for an Eldrazi. It's very easy to pick this early and draft the deck around it. It's also funny with Survival because you get to replenish your graveyard or redraw your graveyard. Bitter Blossom, also a very powerful card. If you've ever played with or against it, you probably know that. There's some non-basic lands, but none stand out to me. And I think that we just have to take Ulamog here. We are still very early in the draft. We can tutor it and we might be able to cheat it into play somehow, or just generate a lot of mana with the help of green mana accelerants. This pack is significantly weaker than what we saw until now. Nostalgic Dreams is a pure combo card. Lightning is nice, and Overgrown Tomb, I suppose, as well. But none of these cards are truly exciting. Troll Ascetic and Molten Tail Masticore fit best into what we're trying to do. And I like Troll Ascetic better than the Masticore. And it's a good... it's just a very good card, very efficient card. Carries swords and doesn't die to targeted removal. So Troll Ascetic is a card you're never unhappy to play. This pack has Arid Mesa and Jungle Shrine as potential splash cards, but fixers. But being green with a single blue card, I don't know how important fixing is going to be. And all of these cards not supporting Preordain is somewhat awkward. We could go with Fathom Seer, but I don't see our deck going into a direction where it has that many islands. I'm going to go with Arid Mesa because I think that fetch lands are the most powerful fixing you can get, and it's not extremely likely that it's going to be relevant, but it's something that might be the best fixing we are going to get. Here, once again, not much for us. There's 10 Roots of Agony, one of the Storm kill cards. I'm just going to go with Firebolt here. We have Arid Mesa now, so we might be able to bold. The alternative would be to pick Woodland Cemetery to go into a potential green-black deck, which isn't unlikely if we manage to open up Recurring Nightmare, but hopefully we can still fix our mana if that happens. Here I'm looking at Experiment 1 as a very solid early drop, and once you have Survival, every creature is somewhat playable. And it should be better than White Mercadal in what we're trying to do, with all the other cards not being truly amazing. I like the new Mythics here, but they aren't for us. Raging Ravine tabled, and pretty sure we're just going to take that. It's always good to have some mana lands, and it would also fix in case we are trying to play some red cards. And it's also quite an easy decision because none of the other cards do much for us. Both Rancor and Flinthoof Boar tabled, and I'm actually not sure which of these is better in our deck, but overall I'm not planning to play a lot of mountains, so Rancor should be the card that we need more. Etched Oracle is a great card, but not in the deck we're trying to draft, which is going to be primarily green based. So it's either Rude Awakening or Tectonic Edge, and I think Rude Awakening is more fit to be put into some kind of combo deck that also plays Heartbeat of Spring or Mirari's Wake. Naturalize is a solid sideboard card, maybe even a main deck card. There is a lot of powerful cards that Naturalize is good against. And pack 2, that's quite interesting. All is Dust and Kozilek, so the second Eldrazi we are seeing, but so far we haven't really seen any ways to cheat them into play, and we also haven't picked up a lot of mana acceleration, so I think for us it's better to take a more conservative pick. Either Tarmogoyf or Harmonize look to be very good. We don't have any mana acceleration yet, so Harmonize loses some of its appeal, and Tarmogoyf is just so efficient that I think, even though it might be the most boring pick out of this pack, I'm just very happy to see a Tarmogoyf whenever I'm drafting green. It's just never going to be bad, and it scaled so absurdly well when the game continues. So yeah, we might even wield something out of this pack. Maybe the Grasslands, Porcelain Legionnaire, Tweed Up Village Harmonize, all fine cards. But let's take the Goyf first. Here we have a lot of powerful cards in white: Elspeth and Baneslayer Angel. In green, the Zenith, Plow Under, Regrowth not so much, and then there's some mono red cards. Giant Solfuge, Goblin Guide are very good in mono red. Even Shardless Agent isn't completely out of the question. It would give us quite some value in what we're trying to do. On the other hand, we haven't seen any fixing for blue yet, so I'm hesitant to make my mana worse. Once again, this pack probably leads me to pick the most conservative card here. Being able to green Suns for Tarmogoyf, Ward of Roots, Troll Ascetic, Obstinate Baloth is going to be great in a lot of matchups, and it adds some great consistency but also power to our deck. So Green Sun Zenith is out of a very, very strong pack. Next up, the green cards are coming from the left side, which is great to see. It means that the fact that we only picked up green cards in pack 1 means that our left neighbors aren't in green, as it looks like. There's a Vengevine, Lotus Cobra, Devoted Druid, and Cultivate, and the pick here has to be between the 2 mana producers. Lotus Cobra being great to ramp into 4 drops but also fix mana, and Devoted Druid always generates a mana, generates 2 mana once in his life, but it can also be pretty absurd once you increase its power somehow. Given that we aren't necessarily splashing a whole lot, I think that Devoted Druid is probably a little better than Lotus Cobra, but it's really close because Lotus Cobra also has 2 power, and that's actually quite relevant. I'm not sure about this pick. I'm going to go with the Cobra here, but that could very well be wrong. This pack doesn't look to have that many compelling options. There's Either While, always something to consider, but if you only have one in your deck, you can never be sure at which point you're going to have it or draw it, basically. It's great when it's in your starting hand, but when you draw it anytime later than that and you aren't playing blue with a lot of draw and discard effects, then it's most likely going to be a dead draw or almost a dead draw. Also, with one Either Vial in your 40 card deck, you can't really reduce the number of lands you're playing because there is no way to guarantee the Vial being there for you. Gadok Teak might be a nice card to have in our sideboard, which we can also Green Sun's Zenith for. Same goes for Broodmate Dragon, but that's a much weaker card, and it's also much more difficult to hardcast. I'm going to go with Gadok here, and we might actually just main deck it. Currently, I don't really see a reason not to play it, but it's too early to say right now. Here we have Indrik's Stompholer and Nature's Lore as the green cards, and we could fetch Sacred Foundry with Arid Mesa to support both Firebolt and Gadok Teak, which might not be irrelevant. We also want to play Raging Ravine anyway. Now, Nature's Lore just gets a forest on turn 2, and we are very creature based, so the pure ramp spells aren't all that interesting. Indrik's Stompholer is interesting because we don't have a 5-drop yet, and being able to survival for a naturalize effect is going to be very valuable. It's possible that the Stompholer would wheel, but I'm going to take it here. This pack has Gideon, Champion of Justice, which we probably won't be able to cast. Woolly Thoktar is very, very strong on turn 3, but it doesn't look like we will be able to support him in our mana base. Academy Rector gets survival, but isn't amazing otherwise. Murdering Bosk is a way to, well, fix your mana somewhat, but it doesn't look like that's what we are actually trying to do. I feel like the pick is either Mox Diamond or Woodfall Primus, with the Primus just being a great 8-drop. That's actually a little more realistic to cast than Ulamog. And I really don't like the disadvantage that Mox Diamond always means. If you accelerate your 2-drops, you're going to be behind because you've spent an extra land to use the Mox Diamond. Now, this might be the time to pick up Farseek, just to make our mana a little better, and it's also a ramp spell, even though our curve is mainly 2-drops. Thoughtscape Battle Mage would be nice as well, but let's focus on our mana first and then worry about the details later. Here, Lion's Eye Diamond and Tomb are very good in Storm and Reanimator respectively. Nature's Claim is okay, but we already have Indrik Stormpolar and Naturalize, so it's not a high priority. I think the best cards for us are probably the Grunt and Taurian Mauler. Even though it's unlikely that we are going to play them, it might become relevant. I like Mauler a little more than the Grunt because the cumulative upkeep on the Grunt is actually very, very tough to support. Not that Mauler is a particularly great card, but it's also not awful. Here it's Treetop Village or Grasslands, and when you look at what we have so far, Grasslands is actually not the card we need, so Treetop Village is the pick as it supports our main plan very well. Here we can pick up Apocrycite. In theory there would be a Teetering Peaks, but I'm not sure that we actually want that. And Charterless Agent it's probably too late to move into blue to support Preordain and Charterless Agent, given that we have no way to produce a single blue mana. Apocrycite is a nice 2-drop that's going to be good in this deck, and Vengefine is a nice gift this late in the pack. I like Ranger when you have Experiment 1 and maybe a Wild Nacatl, but we only have their Experiment and our mana is somewhat shaky, so picking up the green cards is definitely the way to go. Here, Rugged Prairie or Burning of Genier seems to be the two best cards. I think it's very unlikely that we are going to be able to support double red, and we might lose to it, but well, no. We are base green, so the Rugged Prairie filter land is actually somewhat awkward. So I like to pick up this rather than losing to it. Here it's either Tin Street Hooligan or Condemn. I'm going to go with Tin Street Hooligan because it's just more likely that we are going to be able to cast it. And here I'm just gonna pick the Thoktar. Maybe the red and white ends up being viable. And I have no interest in a forest that can also produce white and black, because splashing Gadoktik is much less important. And I want to play red more than white at this point. So maybe the Thoktar can make it, and if not, it's not a big loss. One more pack to go, and there is at least a Wormcall Engine for us, which is a great 6-drop to pick up. The mana fixing is okay in this pack, but not exciting for us. There is Dalton Shackles, very scary card. Magma Jet, Blastodam, really not all that amazing of a pack for us. Maybe we could even just wheel Selesnya Sanctuary and be happy about it. I'm going to go with Wormcoil here. It's going to fit just perfectly into our deck. Here we have some fixing, Breeding Pool and Wooded Bastion. Wooded Bastion isn't out of the question. In green, there's basically only Burial Druid that might actually be the strongest card for us. And alternatively, we could pick up a Tangle Wire. That's also pretty insane. If you can drop it on a board you are advantaged on rather early in the game, it just crushes some opponents. What I don't like about it is that we don't really have a way to actually be very quick in our starts. However, there is a reasonable shot at Burial Druid wheeling. On the other hand, we do want as many 1-drops as possible, so it's a tough pick. I'm going to be conservative once again. Pick the Burial Druid, also to have a 1-mana card I want to get with the Zenith. It's possible that Tangawire wheels, but I wouldn't count on it. Here there's a Primal Command, nothing to sneeze at, and a nice non-creature to have at the top of the curve. Rishaden Port, Gruul Turf, Stirring Wildwood, all fine lands, and Linvala not something we are going to cast with our mana base. So I'm not the biggest fan of Rishaden Port. I think it's fine, but it's never amazing because it just costs you a lot of mana to support it. And even though there are some nice targets like the bounce lands, I would much rather have a Wasteland or a Strip Mine for that. Now, Stirring Wildwood is an option. to hope maybe even support all of the splashes. But currently I think it's much more likely that we're just going to have a very small red splash and not play the white cards, even though I would love to have the Thokta in my deck. Given that there's 2 lands we would like out of this pack and quite a lot of powerful cards, spells, I'm going to go with Primal Command. I almost always want an effect like this in my deck, and we might wheel one of the lands. And if not, we can hopefully still build a deck that just doesn't rely on red cards as much. Here, Fauna Shaman gives us a second survival, and we do have a very nice queue of creatures to get with it. Especially nice with Vengevine, of course. Maybe we should have picked the Vengevine when we didn't. We tabled it, in fact, which was great for us. But now that I think about it, Survival Vengevine is actually quite insane. So it's very likely, it's probably correct to pick Vengevine as soon as you see it. And with that reasoning, I'm going to go with Fauna Shame for the maximum amount of synergy. We also saw Wrath of God and Supreme Verdict here. There's Cryptic Command, Mutavault. A lot of power in these packs. Also Wildfire, so while we hate drafted Burning of Sinja, there's still a Wildfire to worry about. This pack looks comparably weak. Cult of the Hammer is a fine card, but you actually need mountains to make it work, so it's not going to be interesting for us. There is Lotus Bloom, Winter Orb, and Dried Sophisticate. Dried Sophisticate being one of the weaker 2-drops you can play, but it's in this format it's basically a 2-mana 2/1 unblockable, so that's nothing to sneeze at. I'm contemplating whether Winter Orb is a card that we would want in this kind of deck, but overall it doesn't look like we can punish our opponents too well with its effect. On the other hand, the Dried is just never going to be truly amazing. I have a soft spot for Winter Orb. I think it's not a fun card, but it's a powerful card. So I'm going to go with it. Maybe only play it in the sideboard against control, but hopefully we can make it work. Here, Borderland Ranger and Brooding Saurian are both fine. Behemoth Sledge is an okay equipment, but it's just not amazing. And the red cards, Burst Lightning and Arc Trail, also fine, but we have some trouble with our mana, so picking up the Borderland Ranger seems to be a good idea here to make sure that our mana is even better. And Brooding Saurian, while being nice, is just worse than the 2 4-drops we already have. At this point, I'm contemplating whether we can actually support playing Burning of Sinja on our own, but being so creature-centric means that it's going to wrath our side of the board more often than not. So I'm looking at cutting this, and Ulamog is too expensive. With the cards we have, we actually don't need it. So I think this is going to be how our top end is going to look like. Here it's between Scavenging Ooze, Windswept Heath, and Oran Viper. And given that we don't have a way to fetch red mana with Windswept Heath, I think it has to be one of the green creatures. Now, I'm actually not sure which of these we need more, but I haven't been impressed by the Viper at all. I would like it because it costs 3 and we are lacking in 3-drops, but Scavenging Ooze is, I feel, just more powerful over the course of the game and has the additional advantage of being absolutely amazing against Reanimator strategies. Here we could pick up some weird fixing, Savage Lands being just a red-green dual land basically, and Thawing Glaciers being one of the slowest ways to fix your mana, which I'm not interested in. So it's either a tap land for the 2 colors we are going to be able to support, or the Ancient Grudge as another way to hate on artifacts, which could be very relevant in the sideboard. There are some decks that rely on artifacts to fix their mana or to generate a lot of mana. Moment's Peace, not something I really like. And Savage Lands, well, okay, I don't think is needed for what we're trying to do. Selesnya Sanctuary wheeled, but at this point, I think that we aren't going to be playing white. We just didn't see the support for it. So Blastodam looks like the better card for us. Another mass removal, so definitely on the lookout. Tangle Wire is not a card that should wheel, and I think that it's going to be a definite inclusion in this deck. With Wooded Bastion, as before, not of interest anymore. Here, it looks like we just hate draft a card that could be troublesome, and just going to take the largest creature. Next, Orcish Lumberjack might actually be nice in this deck, because we are going to have a lot of forests, and being able to ramp up to an additional 3 mana makes Wormcall, Primus, and Zenith a lot more powerful. So yeah, I kind of like this little creature. Mock Walmarshal might be a nice sideboard card against aggro decks, and I don't think that Lotus Bloom is something we want in this deck, even though it's very good on the if you have it in your starting hand. And here the removal looks better than being able to take control of a creature. And now we have our 45 cards, so let's see if we can build a nice deck out of what we drafted. The core of the deck is definitely going to be the green cards. And then we basically have a couple of artifacts and probably not playing any of the white cards. So maybe we are going to include some of the red cards just because we need to fill out our deck. I think it's unlikely that we are going to be able to just play mono green, and I also think we probably don't want to play mono green. It's just we are losing out on a lot of power if we do. So even though having these late game cards with 2 ways to find them is nice, I just think adding some more not really consistency, but adding some more power in the form of the red cards could be what this deck needs. Now, we already have quite a nice setup here. I think Blastoderm isn't amazing, but it fits well into the deck we're drafting. So, and we basically want to have all the creatures available anyway. Now, Naturalize is a card that we definitely don't need to main deck, because we have a Stompholer and a Primal Command, so we do have a few ways to get rid of the most scary cards. That leaves us with 21 cards, but we haven't included Tanglewire or Winter Orb yet. I'm not sold on Winter Orb. I think Winter Orb is a card that I would much rather sideboard against control-ish strategies, while Tanglewire, because it looks symmetric, but it's really not, because you get a permanent that you can tap, and you can stack the fading trigger such that you have to tap 1 permanent less. So having Tanglewire early on in the game is usually pretty devastating. Now, looking at what we have here, it really means that we won't need many red cards at all to make a functioning deck. The question is if we want more just to have some more power, and maybe some of the other cards are just better. Now, with Borderland Ranger and Farseek, it might not be out of the question to support Woolly Thoctor after all, just as a 5/4 creature that we can also Zenith for with a Zenith set to X = 3, which is just a very cheap spell if you think about it. Now, the red card I'm most excited about is Orcish Lumberjack, because the potential to turn 2 or turn 3 a 5 or 6 drop is absolutely insane, and that's definitely the card that has the most potential out of the red cards. Burning of Zinnia I talked about, I don't want, and Tin Street Hooligan, while nice, is another card that I would prefer to board in. There's also 2 of the burn spells, Firebolt and Burst Lightning, but those are going to be awful or pretty bad against control and good against aggro, so it's not really clear what we want in our main deck. If I were to choose from the red cards, I would probably include Orcish Lumberjack and Taurine Mauler. The Mauler just being a nice cheap creature that grows out of control if the game goes long enough. And just like I said, I kind of like including the Woolly Thoctor as well. I know it's somewhat ambitious, but we do have Lotus Cobra, Borderland Ranger, and Farseek, so it's not completely unreasonable to actually cast the Thokdar. And if we are that far, then we are probably looking at playing Treetop Village, Raging Ravine, Arid Mesa, and of course at least one basic of each type. Probably 2 mountains, just to make sure that we can fetch something with the Mesa. And I'm not even sure about Tectonic Edge. This deck can probably support it pretty easily, but it's also not absolutely necessary. Now, if we want a setup like this without the green spell, without the red burn, and that means we are somewhat weak to cards like Soul of Temptation, then we need to cut down on some of the weaker cards. Wall of Roots has the problem that it doesn't really support our aggressive plan, and we have a lot of ramp that also fixes our mana, so that's preferable. Also, I don't like Apocryphite a whole lot because it's more of a defensive card that turns into an offensive threat later on in the game, and that's kind of the opposite of what this deck is trying to do. So if I take this out and we leave the more matchup dependent cards in the sideboard, then I think we might have a setup I like here, with actually Gadokteak being a card that could just win us some matchups against control on its own, and combo. So just because we have Green Sun's Zenith and the way to discard creatures we can't cast makes it very exciting to just put it in there and hope for the best, basically. So let's see if we can find a cut for, if we play Gadokteak, if we can find a card to cut. It could be the Rancor, which is nice because it makes all of our cards into threats. But when you look at what we have here, most of our cards are threats on their own, and they don't necessarily need 2/2/0 and trample, and we aren't that aggressive to make the Rancor particularly great. So maybe this is a card that we could cut, and then we're still going to be very conservative on our mana with only 1 plains and 2 mountains, just like I said, because we have so many green ways to get the mana we need. Maybe the Lumberjack is not good enough in this deck, but that's something I'm going to be excited to find out. And as before, it's a creature, so we can always discard it and trade it for something large. And we still have 10 forests, a Treetop Village, and a Raging Ravine, so we are on 12 green sources, which should be more than enough to support our mana base. And then we still have a whole lot of red sources and 2 ways to get white mana apart from searching out the plains out of our deck or triggering Lotus Cobra. So overall, I'm quite happy with how this looks, and it's going to be exciting to see if our plans come to fruition. Let's see.